While the mother frantically prays downstairs, Hazel's upstairs with her sister, waiting to go to bed. When her sister asks why they can't be downstairs with their mother, Hazel explains that only their mother can be in the company of the visitors, and she only reaches out to them when their father is at home. We get to see Hazel's representation of their mother communing with the visitors. And if that isn't going fast enough for you, Hazel apparently starts her period for the first time. So far, we're only 2 minutes in, and we're thrown into a crazy setup and can't catch our breath to get a grip of what's going on. I love it! Holly calls out to their mother, and when she comes upstairs, she sees what all the fuss is about. She's actually very distraught when she finds out, and she leaves Holly to play a counting game while she takes Hazel out of the bedroom. While Holly continues to close her eyes and count, she peeks when the door creaks open, and she heads out to find her mother. She enters a door that leads under the stairs, and after following a winding hallway, she comes to her mother's sanctuary, where she finds her mother killing Hazel in a toilet. After alerting her mother to her presence, she runs back upstairs, but her mother's close behind her with a ceremonial knife. Holly actually gets a lot of points here. She just witnessed her mother drown her sister in a toilet, and her first thought is to grab an umbrella to use as a weapon. Then when her father comes home and gets cut to death, she straight up runs away without a second thought. Way to go, Holly. I can't think of too many kids that would have acted with such a cold ferocity, but I guess that's why she's still alive. Then after we get a quick title screen and cut to Holly in this situation. That's quite a jump. Holly is obviously fully grown now, and she seems to be doing okay for herself. Just kidding, of course she's traumatized by toilets. She's definitely peeing in that tub right now. What does she do in public, though? I'd imagine that if I saw what she saw as a child, I'd have all the toilets removed from my house too. After she rinses the tub out, she goes back to the bedroom to caress the childhood doll she hides her birth control in. Somehow her ways of dealing with the trauma are a little more concerning than the trauma itself. I feel like that's just a terrible way to remind yourself of a horrible past. Burn that doll. The next day, Holly goes out to enjoy the snowfall and chop wood. Then, when she goes back inside, she gets a nice fire going. When she goes to the grocery store, she's constantly surrounded by children and babies, and she does her best to completely avoid all of them. Once she gets outside, she seems to be recovering from a panic attack she might have been having, and she grabs a broken mirror out of the snow. Then a random stray dog pops up, and she apparently just leaves it behind as she walks back home. If you're a little thrown off by the way things are jumping around, you're not alone. The basic story's there, but all the random little things that are going on definitely don't have a solid place in the story yet. Just enjoy. When she gets home, she makes food for her husband, Timothy, who's trying to figure out his next step in the book he's making the cover for. He's definitely at a standstill, and he compares how it was so much easier to make the cover for her story. He thanks her for the food and takes it with him as he leaves the house. Holly, on the other hand, takes the broken mirror piece she's collected, cleans it in the sink, then cuts it down to a smaller piece that fits in a mirror she's making for her dollhouse. Later, she ends up dancing around the house on her own, and she eventually starts to imagine herself and Timothy having sex. The thought of it is enough for her to immediately start pleasuring herself. That's not the weird part, though. While she's going at it, she starts to have flashbacks of her mother drowning her sister in the toilet. Does she stop? No, she doesn't. She actually gets closer to climax thinking about that than she did about thinking about actual sex. I can't say that says too much about Timothy, but it definitely shows how messed up she is now. After masturbating to that horrific scene, she decides that this is a good time to relax in the same tub she uses as a toilet. Later that evening, Holly and Timothy go out with another couple to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. And Timothy announces that the two of them have decided to have a baby. Does Holly know about your decision? She was literally just taking birth control and avoiding all children. You might want to let her in on this little secret. The other couple mentions a cult that believes the end of the world is coming soon, called ULM. And Holly actually mentions that she had a friend that was part of it. While Holly's trying to explain that she doesn't want to come to the gathering, she gets a nasty little surprise when a boy walks by. I'd tell him to go away too, I can't really blame her here. I'd think twice about having kids after this too. Also, what kind of kid just wanders around pulling random women's hair? After that traumatizing experience, the night comes to an end, and Holly has a restless night. After trying to get some sleep, she ends up going downstairs to go over a journal that she kept from her childhood that also has the news article that covered her mother's murder-suicide. Suddenly, she hears a clicking noise coming from another part of the house. When she goes to investigate, she ends up being visited by the visitors, and Valerie makes herself known. Holly tries to ask why she disappeared, and it becomes clear that this is the friend that was part of ULM. Valerie assures her that she came back for a bigger reason, but that's all the answers we get. By morning time, Holly wakes up to find that Timothy is just letting Valerie into the house. Valerie believes that there's something bigger in the universe that brought them back together, and she invites them all to the seminar that's going on with ULM. Yes, a taxi probably brought you back here, but how you immediately shift focus to getting Holly to go to ULM is what's concerning. What's even more amazing is the fact that we can see how odd this seems. But the woman that avoids kids like the plague and pees in a tub thinks this is just fine. Okay? That night, the three of them head to the seminar, and Valerie takes Holly to the bathroom. This is a weird point to focus on, but remember how I wondered what she does in public bathrooms? Well... this is what she does. Is this a thing? Are there any sink peers out there? Once the seminar starts, we're introduced to Bruce, who's rather charming in how he addresses the crowd. After he speaks about how they're all visitors and dream surfers in the family, Holly believes that there might be something in his words that she can connect to. He actually tells the crowd that he dreamed of meeting a very important woman that night. And sure enough, he walks right up to Holly. She doubts him at first, but after he speaks her name, she agrees to give him a shot. She ends up pulling out her mother's amulet, and Bruce tells a family member that it's definitely her that they seek. He places his hand on her head and peers into her memories of her childhood, where Holly ends up venturing to as well. She watches the toilet overflow with dark water, and a panic attack starts to overtake her. Suddenly, Bruce falls to the floor, and Holly seems to be healed of her trauma. Holly's all about this faith healing, but Timothy seems more preoccupied with the idea that Bruce tried to screw her mind. That's a mild version of what he says, at least. Back at home, Timothy and Valerie argue about Bruce's true power, but Holly believes it all. She tries to explain a little bit of what she felt, but she just can't get it across to him. She decides to explain how she was never ready for a baby like they decided, and she shows him the birth control in the doll. But she assures him that thanks to Bruce, she's ready to have the baby now. Timothy tries to explain how he wishes she had just been honest with him, and Valerie tries to explain that she just wanted to help by bringing her into the fold. How does Holly patch things up? By initiating a threesome, of course. How else do you handle something like that? Now she sees Bruce in place of Timothy, though. Well, got rid of one trauma to start a new one. At least she can pee in a toilet now, right? After they finish, Valerie and Timothy fall asleep, but Holly wanders the house to find where her visitors usually haunt her. She seems to be alone now, but that soon changes. Damn it! After making it this far into the movie, I was not expecting even the mildest of jump scares. I mean, for some reason that really got me. What gets me even more is how she grabs a little flashlight and wanders out into the woods to a bunker-looking shed to find her bloody mother eating someone and smiling at her. How about we never do that again? During the encounter, Holly's mother grabs the amulet off her neck, and Timothy and Valerie come out to check on her. The next day, Timothy tries to find the amulet, but it's nowhere to be found. Holly heads back to the event center to get some answers, and she comes across a book that speaks of the apocalypse. As she reads the words on the last page, she realizes how it seems to be going through a detailed recollection of what she's doing at that exact moment. Holly makes her way to the main auditorium, and she sees Bruce kneeling in front of another woman. When she gets closer, she realizes that the woman is actually herself, and when she reaches out to herself, Bruce brings them back to their bodies. Bruce assures her that she's the one doing all of this, and she's much stronger than her mother was. Bruce dives into Holly's mind once again, and he takes them back to where it all began. When Holly opens the door to her bedroom, she finds herself counting, and she realizes that she was actually the being behind opening the door when she was a child. As she continues through all of her memories, she actually finds that her mother saw her adult self during the chase, and her sister didn't actually drown in the toilet. Well, at least she can look at toilets freely now. Umbrellas, on the other hand, she's done with them now. Holly brings herself back to the present, and she denies everything that she's seen. As she runs from the meeting, Bruce tries to tell her that she can't help her if she runs, but that doesn't stop her. Once Bruce is alone, he speaks to an unseen being, and he assures them that Holly's the master visitor they've been waiting for. When Holly gets home, she looks around for Timothy, but what she finds is her sister in cult robes. This movie is brought to you by the word trauma. Suddenly, we get a glimpse of Timothy getting carried out of the seminar, and he comes to the yard while holding Holly's amulet. Back inside the house, Valerie's checking on Holly, and Bruce shows up with the murder umbrella. He tells Valerie that she has to stop scaring Holly, and he tells Holly that he's her only chance at getting out of this maze of dreams and nightmares now. Meanwhile, Timothy notices a whole mess of hooded figures coming over the ridge, and he grabs an axe before going in to check on Holly and Valerie. Bruce isn't too happy to see him there, but when Timothy tries to get to them, Bruce renders him helpless as he puts Holly's amulet back on. Suddenly, the hooded figures make their way inside, and Bruce calls them his children, born visitors. As he lies her down and the visitors hold her down, Bruce stabs Valerie over and over to pull her out of Holly's dream. That's when we flash back to the seminar and see Valerie stumble onto the stage a bloody mess. Back in the house, Bruce turns his attention towards Holly, but a horn sounds to announce the arrival of the master. As the sky turns red, a figure emerges from the toilet. That's right, we're back on this toilet thing again. I swear that I've never seen a toilet so much in a movie. I'm starting to think this is a horror movie about a soul-bearing toilet. When Holly sees the master, she notices that it's actually Hazel. Bruce addresses her and announces that she's ready to be brought into the world again as the Second Coming. Bruce takes the ceremonial dagger that Holly's mother tried to use, and he uses it on the mother after she's dragged into the room. After cutting her face off, Bruce wears her face like a mask, and he comes over to Holly, who has her clothes ripped off of her. Bruce lays his hands on Holly, and she begins to grow a child in her belly. Then we get a weird shot from inside her. It felt so out of place, but this entire last bit is so all over that nothing really surprises me anymore. You've got Bruce panting furiously in the other room, Bruce is wearing a face mask, and Holly just gave birth to something that looks like it came out of a science fiction movie in the 80s. Things are how they are at this point. As Holly holds her whatever it is she gave birth to, she actually opens the sack to reveal an even creepier baby. Bruce cuts a whole slab of skin off the mother's back and comes over to wrap the baby in it. What am I watching? Hazel comes over to give her blessing, but she's now an old woman that was in the picture from the beginning of the movie. Bruce and his children kneel before the baby, and Holly carries it upstairs for all of the hooded figures to see their new leader. As Bruce blows the resounding horn, what the hell is going on? Things got weird. They got weird so quickly. Then, the credits roll.